Let's speak now to CNN's Evan Perez, former associate counsel to President George W. Bush, Jamil Jaffer as well. Evan, first, help me understand something here. So he refers to a document, or seems to, on an audio recording, classified document.
Right.
They look for that document. They have not produced that document. Do we know, or is there any understanding of whether that means he doesn't have it, doesn't know if he still has it, is refusing to still give it, or perhaps never had it?
All of the above could be the answer to that. And it's quite possible, by the way, that the Justice Department or the government, the Pentagon, may have this document in its possession. But part of the job here for these investigators is to make sure everything that is in the possession of the former president, who does not have a right to have these government records anymore, that all of that is returned into the possession of the government. And that includes, for instance, any notes that any of his aides may have taken during one of these meetings. For instance, if he was discussing some of this classified information in one of these settings, at Bedminster, for instance, or during this book interview, and any notes were taken, the Justice Department, the FBI, wants possession of those because those are new records that contain classified information. So all of that is important for them to return.
Okay, Jamil, in terms of Trump's potential legal exposure here for having classified documents he should not have had after leaving office, does it? He already had them and then gave some back and gave a few more back and was a little slow in doing it. If he still had them today, does that greatly increase his legal liability?
Well, I think what it makes clear is that he knowingly violated the law, right? The law says you can't take these classified documents out. The idea that he claims he complied with the Presidential Records Act, that's completely wrong. He absolutely did not. But beyond that, the Espionage Act says that if you have national defense information and you're told you have it and you're asked to give it back and you don't, then you violate the Espionage Act. And this demonstrates knowledge and potentially intent if, in fact, he did have this document with him.
And possibly multiple times where you were told and didn't give him back. To date, a federal judge has denied the DOJ's request to hold Trump or his legal team in contempt for failing to comply. Would this change that potentially? I mean, could they go back to the court and say, hey, listen, now he's really in contempt, in effect?
Could be, if in fact they could demonstrate he had this document, right? If he had this document, knew he had the document, had been asked for it, and didn't give it back, I mean, it's very hard to combat that claim. We don't know if he actually had this document. Again, we don't know if he ate it, right? Flushed it down the toilet. I mean,
there was, that's not so out there, right? There was evidence that he did that, photographs, in fact, that he did that while he was in office.
The Justice Department is in a bit of a bind here, right? Because they believe that he still has these documents. But when they did the search back last August in Mar-a-Lago, they could have gone to a judge and said, we want to search also Bedminster and all these other places. But they chose to do just one search. And so that's partly why I think they're in this place where they're trying to retrieve documents, but they don't know whether there might be others in other locations.
And meanwhile, it's sensitive territory because you're searching the many properties of a former president.
Right.
I know these things are not necessarily connected, but can we draw any connection between the former vice president being cleared in other words, the DOJ looked into his handling of classified documents, which, by the way, in volume and also in the way he answers these requests are night and day compared to the former president. But they've cleared that. You've covered the Justice Department for a long time. Could that indicate they're moving forward? Okay, we put this out of the way, and now we can make a decision on the Trump case.
I think they're unconnected, partly because, we're talking about a volume, just a very different volume, right? We're talking about about a dozen documents in the Pence case. They were discovered in January. This was still being handled by the Justice Department, not a special counsel. And they were looking at the calendar. A lot of times, people the Justice Department gets criticized for how long these types of things take. In this case, they knew that Pence might be announcing for president next week, and they need to get out of the way of that because the standard had been set by Merrick Garland, right? If he declares, suddenly they may have to appoint a special counsel. So I think everybody at the Justice Department was aware of that date certain.
Okay, Evan, Jamil, stand by because we have some new information regarding the former vice president. Boris, what do we know?